stuck? Is something holding you back? Are there obstacles in your way? Well, let's smash through those obstacles so that you can live your best life. Hi, I'm Matt Brooks, founder of Matt Brooks Coaching, and I'm fascinated with how people overcome barriers and achieve success. Join me for insights, strategies, and inspiring stories as we explore practical tips and powerful tools to unlock your full potential. This is the Barrier Busting Podcast. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the second episode of the Barrier Busting Podcast. My name is Matt Brooks, and I'm a certified professional life coach working in private practice. You can find out more about me by visiting www.mattbrookscoaching.com. If you tuned in last week, you heard a bit about me. You heard a bit about the format of the show. My goal being that these are roughly 30-minute podcasts, so you can hear them on maybe one commute to work throughout the week. And how if there's a topic like the one I'm talking about now, habits, which has a ton of information, I'm going to give you a little bit each week rather than pummel you with information, which makes you feel like you got to get out a notebook and take notes. Not going to do that to you. Just going to be a little bit every week. I'm going to have some guests on the show. I'm going to do some shows myself. And last week, if you tuned in, you heard the first of our discussions on habits, in particular, how habits form, how our brains make automatic behaviors. Today, I'm going to talk about techniques for building habits, particularly good ones. And I want to start with a story, a true story from my life in which I kind of accidentally made a huge change that created a ripple effect of good and productive habits that also really changed my life, really improved my life. I remember this night vividly. I was about 30 years old. It was January, so it was winter. And at the time, I was running a small nonprofit. Okay, I've been doing this for a couple years. And if you know anything about nonprofits, you understand that the term small nonprofit doesn't mean small work. It means typically small budget. It means typically small staff, but it doesn't mean small work. It's, in fact, enormous amounts of work, really hard. And in particular, because you have a small staff, you end up wearing a lot of hats. Well, I was young and inexperienced and buried in work, just buried. I mean, I was barely keeping my head above water in this job. I was always frantic. I was always last minute. And guess what else I was? Really stressed out all the time. All right. Anyways, there was this day that I remember vividly. I had to go, it was in January, I had to go to a statewide day-long workshop in a city that was about an hour and a half drive from where I lived. Typically would take an hour and a half, okay? So I go, I'm there all day. I stay afterwards to have dinner with a couple of my colleagues from around the state, and then I leave to come home. And as I'm leaving the restaurant, there's this little trickle of snow just coming down. Just a teeny little bit, no big deal. Driving in snow never freaked me out, so I wasn't too worried. And, of course, this was before smartphones, so I couldn't just check the weather real quick, right? So I made a decision to get in my car and drive home. Well, I'm driving, and this little trickle of snow starts to become more than a trickle and more. And before you knew it, I was in a full-blown snowstorm, like almost blizzard level, right? It was bad. And I'm stuck on a highway. And what should have taken an hour and a half to get home ended up taking me about almost 3.5 hours. White-knuckled, stressful driving. But I made it. I got home and got into my driveway, and I remember I just sat in the car for a minute or two. I was just sort of like motionless because it was so stressful. It was one of the, I'm sure many of you have had drives like this, very stressful in horrible weather. But I made it home. So I'm back. I made it. So I go into my apartment, and at the time I had this beautiful one-bedroom apartment with cathedral ceilings and hardwood floors. It was gorgeous. But I walk in, and the place is an absolute fucking disaster area. I mean, it was a mess. I mean, dishes had piled up in the sink. There were clothes all over the place. I hadn't dusted or wiped anything in God knows how long. It's what you would expect to see from, a 19-year-old in his first apartment, but I'm 30. And I don't know what it was that was different when I walked in that night than any other night, but for some reason this hit me hard. Like I was really upset. But I go to sit down on my couch and try to chill out, and I just couldn't. I'm looking around and I'm thinking, this is pathetic. My home needs to be a refuge. I've got this really stressful job. I've got to have a place where I can come and relax, and ain't nothing relaxing about this. So you know what I did? I put on a pot of coffee and I pulled an all-nighter cleaning that place. And I mean, I cleaned it and I organized everything. So I didn't just clean it up and dust it and mop and all that stuff. I reorganized cabinets, closets, shelves, everything I could. I tried to make it as efficient as possible so that the things I regularly used I could grab easily. And by 8 o'clock the next morning, man, that place was sparkling. It was spotless. It was beautiful. I was so proud of it. And I was really on fire. I mean, I didn't get tired that night. I was just on fire doing this. But by the time I was done at 8 o'clock in the morning, of course, I crashed, right? I was out of it. So I went to bed, got up middle, late afternoon. And at that point, I was hangry, man. I was hungry. I was starving. So I went to the stove and I made myself some eggs and toast and who knows what else. And I noticed something happen, just kind of automatically. I cracked the eggs into the pan, and before I did anything else, I put the egg carton back in the fridge. I put the toast in the oven, and before I did anything else, I put the bread back in the bread box. I mean, I was cleaning as I was cooking. And then I ate, and I'm sitting there looking at my beautiful, clean place, and I'm feeling just great about it. And as soon as I was done, I rinsed the dishes and put them in the dishwasher. I cleaned up everything so that my place was right back to where it was before I cooked. All right, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, so you grew the fuck up. Good for you. All right, fair. But what you got to understand is this one event snowballed in many areas of my life. It actually didn't end there. It ultimately made me more efficient in my work and in the use of my time. And that gave me significantly more free time. And moreover, and most importantly, it made me calmer. Ultimately, I wasn't always rushing at the last minute. And it was all because I spent that one night cleaning my place. It had a profound impact on everything. Here's how. It began to spill over into all sorts of areas of my life. So the satisfaction I got from that place being so clean was so gratifying that I began to crave more of it. First, it bled over into how I organized my time management skills. I started to crave efficiency. And I kept experimenting until I found the perfect groove, until I found the way to use my time more wisely. So I became a list maker. I kept reevaluating how I made my lists. Anyways, it really worked over time, and I began to crave that. It got to the point where if I had free time, I'd work up like on an upcoming project that I might have. So I'd look at my calendar like 2-3 months out, and I'd say, oh, I've got to give a lecture in 2 months. So let's say I had a free afternoon or a free day. I mean, I wouldn't work, all day. I wouldn't kill myself, but I would use some of that time to do some of the work for that future project. So if I had a lecture, I might spend an hour gathering research or reading a few things or jotting down some notes or an outline. I wouldn't do the project, but I'd do a component of the project. And I would do that every time I had free time, so that by the time I came close to this lecture, I had most of my ducks in a row. And it wasn't such an oppressive experience. I wasn't rushing to the last minute and stressing myself out, That's what happened with time. And the same thing happened with so many other areas of my life. That I just got so addicted to being efficient and being, organized and having my poop in a group that it just took over everything. And what do you know? In time, I actually got ahead of myself. It might have took a year or two before I really got into a great groove with all this, but it came to a point where I wasn't just keeping my head above water. I was almost floating. And that created something awesome. Lots more free time. And that opened up new areas of my life, like playing golf 4 times a week. It turns out that what happened was I accidentally, or organically, if you will, stumbled onto several areas of techniques that the habit experts recommend long before ever having read about this at all. I developed what's called a keystone habit. I changed my environment. I did something called habit stacking, even though I didn't even know what that was. I primed my environment, and I put into practice a version of the 1% rule. I'm going to talk about all that today. But first, the driving force behind all of those changes was that first step, pulling that all-nighter to completely clean and organize my home. This, in my case, can be considered what's called a keystone habit. The phrase keystone habit was first coined by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, which is a book I've been referring to in these podcasts. It's a fantastic book I can't recommend enough. And it's the book where I take a lot of information for this podcast today, in fact. It's going to have a lot more than what I'm going to share, so please check it out. James Clear, Atomic Habits. A keystone habit is a habit one adopts and develops that ultimately creates a snowball effect of positive changes in one's life. It's a habit that triggers a cascade of other new and positive habits. And that's precisely what happened after pulling that all-nighter. The very fact that it felt so good to have my place not only looking so good, but also so organized, and that I could feel a difference of some kind, that I was happier, made me crave it, and kept me focused on at least maintaining the hard work that I had done. I didn't want to fall back. That craving grew in me, and as I mentioned, a whole slew of new habits grew out of it. So it's true. Small changes can lead to big results. I've lived it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, I'll break down the 4 laws of behavior change and the various habit building techniques that I stumbled upon after my all-night cleaning binge.
Feeling overwhelmed? Struggling to find balance in your daily life? At Matt Brooks Coaching, we get it, and we can help. With over 25 years of nonprofit executive experience and an MSW with a clinical focus, Matt Brooks offers personalized coaching designed to help you rise above your challenges and live your best life. Whether you aim to advance your career, enhance your skills, or simply find more clarity and peace, Matt is here to be your partner and ally. Visit mattbrookscoaching.com to book your free discovery session today. Take the first step towards a brighter tomorrow.
Okay, I'm back. Now, before we get into specific techniques for creating habits, I want to start with a thought about our overall approach to habit development and or behavioral change. It's the basic premise of James Clear's book that small changes or small habits have the ability to grow exponentially, that making small changes, even just 1% changes, can be like investing small amounts of money. You may not see any immediate impact from them, but over time, the small behaviors accumulate, and the changes and habits that are spawned from just one small change can compound into huge results. Clear states that, quote, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. I really like that phrase. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. His idea is that if you make just one small improvement, create one new but small and easy to accomplish habit, that once it does become a habit, as in an automatic behavior, tacking on more small improvements will be easy, and over time, you'll notice a big change. This is why we so often fail at reaching our goals in regards to habit or behavior change, essentially why most New Year's Eve resolutions don't pan out. Think about it and be honest. How many New Year's resolutions have you made in your life, and how many actually happened? Come on, be honest. Well, perhaps the reason we don't succeed is that our eyes are too big for our stomachs. Seriously, we're humans, not sports cars. We can't go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. We need to be realistic with our goals. But if we are realistic, the long-term results could be very surprising. So start small and build more habits out from there. Once a small improvement becomes a habit, one that gets automated in your brain, you just tack on another small improvement. Once that becomes a habit, just add another, and so on. You'll be amazed how much you will accomplish. And if you do it right, by next New Year's Eve, you might just have accomplished that larger goal you were hoping to attain. The key, though, is to be persistent. Have patience. This can be a frustrating process because the gains are so small, you might think you're not really getting anywhere. But be assured you are. Bit by bit, you'll be chipping away at bad behaviors and learning new ones. Say your goal is to keep your home more organized. Start with something simple, something you could do in 2 minutes each day. Once that becomes automatic, add another simple thing. So, for instance, start by emptying the dishwasher while waiting for your coffee to brew in the morning. After a couple of weeks, that will just become automatic. Then decide to go through your mail every day and, rather than leave it in a pile, throw out what you don't need and do something with what you do need. Put those mail pieces in an appropriate place so that they aren't cluttering up your kitchen table. Once that becomes automatic, add another. And if you think little daily habits don't add up, Winston Churchill had 2 interesting daily habits. On top of all the stuff he had to do, he had 2 daily habits: writing and, of all things, bricklaying. His saying was 2,000 words and 200 bricks a day. Now, I don't know how many walls he built, but he published 43 books in 72 volumes, and as best we can tell, he wrote about 2,500 speeches, all while, keeping busy with a few other things that he had on his plate. Okay, so let's get into the 4 laws of behavioral change. James Clear identifies 4 laws of behavior change in his book, Atomic Habits. These are simple rules to guide you as you create good habits and break bad ones. In next week's episode, I'll discuss how to change bad habits, but for today, I'm focusing on creating good ones. The 4 laws are: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. He also shares several techniques for each of these, and again, I highly encourage you to read his book. Today, I'm just going to give you a few. Let's start with make it obvious. You know about impulse buying, right? Grocery stores, for instance, strategically place products in certain places and at eye level to entice you to act on an impulse and buy a product. And we all know that it works. All cues present themselves to us through our sensory perception. Some are consciously noticed and some are not. Cues can be delivered through smell, touch, taste, sight, and sound, but the most potent is through vision. According to Clear, we have about 11 million sensory receptors in our body, and approximately 10 million of them are dedicated to sight. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase out of sight, out of mind, right? So visual cues are particularly potent and effective. Therefore, if you want to develop a new habit, make the cue easily visible. Alter your work or home environment so that you will easily and regularly see the cues. Another quick story from my life. My wife still makes fun of me for this. When we started dating, she noticed something in my apartment that she couldn't stop laughing about. I was doing a regimen of vitamins at the time, every day taking a series of vitamins. And the way to make sure that I'd remember was I got these sort of half-size Ziploc bags, and I'd put a day's worth of vitamins in a Ziploc bag, and I'd make a bowl full of them. And I put that bowl in kind of the entryway to my apartment. Now, it was a 1-bedroom apartment, so it's not like an official entryway, but that was the area where I'd have to walk by every time I went to the bathroom and every time I came in and out. Now, she made fun of me and still does to this day, but guess what? I never missed a day of taking those vitamins. I saw them, they'd cue me, I'd do it. Another technique he brings up is the idea of habit stacking, which was first introduced by F.J. Scott in his book of the same name. Another good read, by the way, if you're interested. The idea here centers around the notion that no behaviors happen in isolation, that actions often cue triggers to more actions. You run your dishwasher, but you use up the last of your detergent, so you head to the grocery store. But on the way, and since you're already out, you stop and pick up your dry cleaning, which reminds you to stop at the bank and withdraw cash because the bank is next door to the dry cleaners, etc. That's how that works. Now, in that situation, our actions may not be intentional, with each addition to the first habit done subconsciously. However, we can do this consciously. We can add new and more productive habits to our lives. You just stack a new habit onto an already existing one. Say you want to start reading in bed, right? Well, during your morning ritual of showering, brushing your teeth, and getting dressed, leave a book on or by your pillow. Not on the nightstand, because if it's on the nightstand, you don't need to touch it. But if it's in your bed, you'll at least have to move it before you can get in bed, so you're more likely to open it up and read. Or say you want to start working out each day. Well, add to your pre-bedtime ritual something like putting out your workout clothes for the next day in a place you'll immediately see them when you get up. So, try inserting new actions in the middle of regular, everyday routines, thereby capitalizing on existing momentum. It's simple. Let one behavior lead to the next. That brings us to the second law of behavior change: make it attractive. This is all about dopamine. Gotta love dopamine, right? Actually, all habits involve dopamine. What is dopamine? Well, it's a neurotransmitter that your brain makes that gives you a sense of pleasure. It's often called the feel-good hormone. Dopamine lets us focus, or helps us focus, helps us work towards goals, find interesting things, and make plans. It also drives our motivation to feel pleasure. Eat the donut, get a hit of dopamine. Win on a scratch ticket, get a hit of dopamine. Get some likes on Facebook, get a hit of dopamine. In terms of habits, dopamine is released not just when you experience something pleasurable, but also when you predict or anticipate pleasure. This is important. In other words, you get a hit of dopamine when you get to the reward stage of the habit loop, but you also get one when you're still in the cue cravings stage. So, trying to build a new habit? Find a way to make the reward kick in some dopamine, thereby making it not just attractive, but irresistible. As I mentioned before, there are several more techniques given for each of the 4 rules of behavior change in James Clear's book. Honorable mention in this category, the second law, which is to make it attractive, is something called temptation bundling, or adding an action you want to an action you need. So let's say you want to watch reruns of The Sopranos, but you have a young family and your spouse won't allow it until late at night when you need to be sleeping. And also, you need to work out more because you've been putting on weight. So, watch Sopranos episodes on your iPad while working out on a treadmill or stationary bike. Add the thing you want to the thing you need, thus making the thing you need more attractive. Now, the third law of behavioral change: make it easy. Make it easy. The key here is forward motion, not the size of the accomplishment. Don't overwhelm yourself with figuring out the best course of action. Just actually take action. Action is what brings us outcomes. Just be sure to choose the action that won't weigh you down. Something easy. The tougher the action, the more energy required to do it. And if you're trying to change behavior, the tougher the action, the less likely you are to succeed. The less likely you are to maintain the energy required. So do things that are easy and when they are easy. If you cook on the weekend, why not make a few extra meals at the same time so that some of your dinners for the week are already done and simply need to be reheated? Want to be more organized? Set aside 10 minutes each night to write on a piece of paper a plan for your next day. Just 10 minutes. Does that sound hard? And one thing to remember in all of this: you don't need to be perfect to succeed in developing a new habit. Yes, developing habits requires repetition and discipline. But if you miss a day, don't just give up. Don't get discouraged and throw in the towel. Instead, give yourself some grace. It's just one day. The key is to remember forward motion. So the rule in this instance is not twice in a row. Miss a day? Okay. Miss 2? You have the beginning of another habit, one you don't want. That brings us to the fourth and final law of behavior change: make it satisfying. As James Clear states, the cardinal rule of behavior change is that we are more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience is satisfying. It's why toothpaste has minty flavor. The flavor doesn't make the toothpaste more effective, but it does make the experience more satisfying. Your mouth feels clean and refreshed. So whatever you want to change, you have a better chance if you can find a way to make it satisfying. If it kicks in your dopamine and makes you feel good, you'll crave more of that reward, and thus a habit will be born. One last thing to remember, especially in terms of immediate satisfaction: the cost of good habits are in the present. That's the routine you have to go through to obtain the reward. However, the cost of destructive habits is in the future. The entire reason we have bad habits is because they offer some immediate satisfaction, right? But like the development of small habits that can grow exponentially, the price we pay for the satisfaction that bad habits provides also accumulates over time, and these outcomes are not so desirable. That's what I'm going to talk about next week. Bad habits, why they're so hard to break, and I'm going to share some tips for how to break them using an inverted version of the same 4 laws of behavioral change. I'll explain that more next time. That's it for today. For now, thanks for listening. I hope you found this helpful and enjoyable, and if you did enjoy it, please hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified each time I drop a new episode. Be well, and I'll catch you next time on the Barrier Busting Podcast.